together from a high vantage point. Milo mentions that he spoke more about Turan with his mother before they went to bed the previous night. The two of them walk through the busy streets of the city marketplace. Milo tells Turan that his magic talent is on par with Mesa's, and he's impressed that Turan never neglects his physical training. He seems to genuinely respect Turan's discipline. He admits that his mother originally wanted to stop looking down on him as just a wandering noble without any backing. She's clearly reevaluating his worth. Turan realizes that it sounds like Lady Arabian is trying to recruit him into her house. He looks at Milo, seeing the truth in the young man's words. Milo explains his mother's tactic of giving generously to put someone in debt before introducing them to social temptations. He smiles, well acquainted with her recruitment strategies. He looks up with a mischievous grin, mentioning that several adults in the house were brought in exactly like that. Turan finds the whole situation a bit troubling as he listens to the family's secrets. Milo tells him not to worry too much, as the magic tool is just a way to buy his favor. He clarifies that Turan won't be forced into anything he doesn't want, even if he accepts the gift. Milo defends his mother's methods, saying she isn't lacking in refinement. Turan just gives a small wave, seemingly overwhelmed by the family's complex social games. Milo asks if Turan has anything else planned for the rest of the day. They stop in the middle of the street to talk. Turan mentions that he promised to train with Mesa in the evening, but wonders why Milo is asking. He looks at his companion with a neutral expression. Milo realizes they still have a significant amount of time before the sun sets. His eyes light up as a new idea comes to him. Milo slings an arm around Turan's shoulder, insisting that he come on patrol with him instead. He promises that Zavillan has plenty of things to enjoy, even if it isn't the capital. He teases Turan, asking if he really intended to spend the whole day holed up in a corner training magic. He seems determined to show him a good time. Turan's expression is blank as he admits that was exactly his plan. He doesn't seem particularly interested in the local entertainment. Milo drags the reluctant Turan through the city streets, telling him that life is too short not to enjoy it. Turan is pulled along, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. The scene shifts to a spinning roulette wheel in one of the city's entertainment districts. The blur of colors and the sound of the ball suggest they've arrived at a place of gambling. Turan and Milo arrive at the entrance of a bustling entertainment hall. Milo looks back with a grin, eager to show Turan the sights of Zavillan. Inside the hall, Milo talks animatedly about the games and shows available. Turan looks around with a neutral expression, unimpressed by the gambling and noise. They walk through a crowded marketplace where vendors call out their wares, and a horse carriage rolls past on the cobblestones. The city is alive with the hum of daily commerce. Turan pauses for a moment, looking over his shoulder as if sensing something in the air. He remains observant even in the middle of the crowd. He stops in front of a wall covered in notices and wanted posters. His eyes fix on one particular sheet that stands out from the rest. A close-up reveals his surprise as he recognizes a name or a face. The atmosphere shifts as he focuses on the bounty notice. The poster features a stern profile of a man, with the name KEORN written clearly above a staggering reward amount. In a separate mental image or memory, the man from the poster is shown with an X-shaped scar on his nose and a cigarette in his mouth. He laughs with a rugged, carefree expression. The sound of clashing steel echoes as a transition to a different scene. The imagery of combat fills the air. On a theater stage, actors recreate a battle from the year 2195. The narrator's voice explains how the warriors of Arabian ventured into the demon desert. The play depicts the knight Kjorn defeating an enemy with divine help after a brutal struggle. The actors move with exaggerated, heroic gestures. In the audience, Milo claps enthusiastically, thoroughly enjoying the performance. Turan sits beside him, his hands folded as he watches with a thoughtful, quiet interest. After the show, Milo turns to Turan and asks if he found the performance worth watching. Turan admits that it was very good, though he seems more focused on the story than the spectacle. He thinks to himself about the knight's unmatched humility as portrayed on stage. A vision of the scarred man from the poster lingers in his mind. As the sun sets over the castle of Zavillan, Turan looks at the horizon with a determined thought. He resolves to ask the real Kiorn if the stories are true if they ever meet. Later that night, Turan lies awake in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling of his guest room. The events of the day and the legend of the night occupy his thoughts. Suddenly, a hulking shadow looms over him. Aziz, the scarred warrior, looks down at Turan with a heavy, intimidating presence. Aziz asks if he's rested well enough, his voice deep and gravelly. Turan is startled by the sudden appearance and looks up from his pillow. Turan sits up and rubs his eye, still half asleep as he tries to make sense of the early morning visit. Aziz tells him it's time for toughening and orders him to follow. He stands by the bed, waiting for Turan to move. He explains that the body doesn't get stronger by resting, but by being tempered through hardship. He speaks with the authority of a seasoned fighter. Turan doesn't argue, simply getting out of bed and preparing himself for whatever training is ahead. He looks toward Aziz with a steady gaze, deciding that he'll gain more through this training than he would by just playing around with Milo. Just as they are about to leave, the door bursts open and Milo rushes in. He's full of energy, excited to tell Turan about a new performance he heard about. Milo's excitement vanishes instantly when he sees Aziz. He recoils in terror, shouting out in surprise at the sight of his uncle. Aziz informs Milo that they are heading to training and suggests that he should come along to temper his weak body. Milo freezes, looking like he's seen a ghost. Without a second thought, Milo turns and sprints out of the room, yelling that he hasn't fully recovered yet. He disappears down the hallway in a panic. Turan watches him go, completely baffled by the reaction. He wonders why Milo is so terrified of a little physical training. The training begins in earnest, and Turan is soon drenched in sweat. His face is a mask of intense concentration and strain as he pushes his limits. In the training hall, Aziz watches with crossed arms as Turan performs push-ups. A massive set of iron weights is balanced precariously on Turan's back. Turan groans under the immense pressure, his muscles trembling. Aziz tells him that he shouldn't yield to such a small amount of pain, claiming his mind is being dominated by his weakness. A close-up of Turan's hand on the floor shows it shaking violently. He lets out a strained grunt as he tries to complete one more repetition. Aziz finally tells him that's enough for now. He looks down at the exhausted young man with a neutral, evaluative gaze. Turan collapses onto his back, gasping for air as the weight is removed. He's completely spent, his chest heaving with every breath. Aziz asks if the workout was tiring. Turan can only manage a weak yes, while lying flat on the ground. Aziz notes that Turan should count himself lucky for being a wizard, since he only has to do this once. Turan looks up, curious about the difference. Turan pulls himself into a sitting position as Aziz explains the mechanics of mana and the body. He says that an ordinary person's body will weaken again after training if it's not constantly maintained. He explains that wizards have mana to maintain their bodies in optimal condition once they've been tempered. He describes it as forging the body into steel that doesn't weaken. Aziz lets out a small, almost predatory smile, telling Turan that he must be fully rested now after that brief explanation. Turan's eyes widen in horror as he realizes the lecture was his only break. He tries to protest, but the shock is clear on his face. Aziz's face fills the frame as he laughs, telling Turan that his body doesn't lie. He announces that it's time to move on to weaponry and combat. The scene shifts back to the weight-filled gym as Turan's scream of agony echoes through the hall. The training session is far from over. Close-up of Turan gasping for breath, sweat running down his face as he pushes through exhaustion. A narration box notes that his days at House Berg have been fulfilling indeed. In a training hall, Turan and Aziz spar with wooden swords, the sounds of their impacts echoing. Haram explains that they are in a special space where the body feels several times heavier than usual, warning that one misstep could bury him in the floor. In the evening, Turan returns to the mansion to continue his magic training with Mesa. He watches closely as she demonstrates how to generate lightning using finger friction. A wide shot of the mansion roof silhouetted against a fading sunset. A narration box indicates that 3 weeks have passed in this cycle of rigorous training. A bolt of blue lightning strikes the target board with a loud crack, shattering the center. The impact sends splinters flying as the energy dissipates. Turan looks down at his hand, sparks still dancing across his fingertips. He stares at the target with a neutral expression, nodding that he missed his mark once again. Mesa stands nearby, her long black hair catching the evening light as she watches him. She remarks that he is struggling more than she had expected him to. Turan looks over his shoulder with a slight, weary smile. He suggests that the difficulty stems from him not being a native of Arabian, unlike the princess. The two stand in the courtyard, their figures long shadows on the stone ground. Mesa admits that it is difficult for her to teach him, as she never had to consciously think about how to aim her lightning. Melissa asked if it wasn't just a matter of shooting it to hit the mark, looking skeptical. Turan countered that the task was significantly harder than one might think. Mesa's head turns sharply at the sound of someone shouting her name. Her expression shifts into one of alertness as the interruption breaks her concentration. Ashies, clad in a traveling cloak, marches across the courtyard toward them. He calls out to Mesa, having finally located her and Turan in the garden. Turan turns to look at the newcomer, his expression curious but guarded. He watches the man approach, wondering about the urgency of the visit. Mesa stands her ground, her arms crossed as she stares coldly at Ashies. She tells him that their business is none of his concern and asks what brought him there. She reminds Ashies that she explicitly told the main house not to approach her while she was recovering. Ashies remains steadfast despite her icy tone. Ashies ignores the rebuke, focusing on his duty. He informs her that the patriarch has summoned her immediately. Mesa asks for the reason, warning Ashies that he will be punished if he disturbed her for a trivial matter. Ashies looks up, his face grim as he prepares to deliver the news. Ashies reveals that dark elves have been rampaging extensively throughout the southern regions. The news hangs heavy in the air as the sun continues to set. He continues, stating that 3 cities have already fallen and the leadership is preparing to assemble an expedition force. Turan and Mesa stand frozen by the severity of the report. A mental image of the threat appears, showing a horde of monstrous dark elves with glowing yellow eyes. They loom out of the shadows, looking like a terrifying and unstoppable army. A dramatic close-up of Turan's face as the reality of the situation sinks in. Large text above him announces that the enemy has finally appeared. Turan and Mesa are standing in the estate garden at sunset. An attendant bows as Mesa waves him away, promising she'll be back shortly. Mesa sighs, her gaze lingering on the horizon. She decides it's time for her to head out as well. Before leaving, she turns back to Turan. She casually mentions it's time to collect payment for showing him that disgusting decomposition magic earlier. She claps her hands together with a sharp sound, drawing his full attention. Her expression is serious now. She leans in, asking Turan if he knows that electricity actually flows through the human body. Turan looks back at her, clearly skeptical of the concept. It's not the kind of magic he's used to hearing about. Mesa smirks, enjoying his reaction. She explains that this knowledge is a closely guarded secret of the Arabian family. She offers a deal. His debt will be paid if she teaches him how to master this properly. She notes it will definitely be a huge help to his combat training. She starts the lecture, explaining how every sight and sensation is just a tiny electrical signal sent to the brain. Whether it's through the eyes or the nose, it's all just data traveling through pathways. Turan closes his eyes, absorbing the theory as she continues. It's a completely different way of looking at the body. A visual of an eye crackling with blue energy illustrates her point. Those tiny electrical signals are the key to everything. She explains that this electricity flows throughout the entire body, like a network of lightning. The focus shifts to the legs, showing the glowing pathways of the nervous system. If you can control the flow, you control the machine. She suggests that if one can accelerate those signals, their physical response time would explode. A massive surge of blue lightning coils through the body's frame. Turan opens his eyes, and a star-like spark of blue mana ignites in his pupil as lightning arcs across his face. He's trying to tap into that current. The two stand opposite each other in the silent courtyard as the sun continues to dip. A blue butterfly flutters between them. Mesa begins to move, her image already beginning to blur. She starts to flicker like a glitch in reality. In a flash, her image warps and shifts right in front of him. She asks him how he likes the demonstration. Turan can only laugh, sweat beading on his forehead. He's stunned by the sheer speed she just displayed. He decides to give it a shot, his own head crackling with unstable blue sparks as he tries to force the mana into his nerves. It's a violent, buzzing sensation. The feedback is immediate. Turan doubles over, grunting in pain as his body recoils from the reckless surge. It's like his brain just short-circuited. Mesa watches him with a knowing look. She points out that he simply poured out his mana way too recklessly for a first try. She warns him that a headache is inevitable while he adjusts, but she promises that once he gets used to it, he'll be able to maintain that state for quite a while. Turan rubs his head, feeling the burn. He realizes this technique is far more valuable than anything he could have given her in return. With a light click of her boots, Mesa leaps backward, heading for the high palace walls. She calls back that this is just an investment because he actually seems to have some talent. She doesn't bet on losing horses. Turan watches from below as she effortlessly vaults into the air, a trail of white wind behind her. She warns him that if he learns an even more incredible spell in the future, she'll collect it all back, along with his debt for today. He's left standing alone, staring up at the empty sky where she vanished into the sunset. A high-pitched hawk's cry echoes through the air as the scene shifts away from the palace. A bird of prey soars high above a sprawling stone city under a clear blue sky. A few feathers drift down through the air. This is Morgan City, the bustling heart of the Dakin Plains. A massive army is lined up in the streets, looking like a black tide. The citizens are out in force, arms raised and cheering wildly. "Glory to Arabian!" echoes through the stone streets as soldiers march past. Turan stands in the crowd with the Berg family. He observes that while this is just a departure ceremony to hunt dark elves, the enthusiasm makes it feel like a victory parade. Milo's eyes light up as he spots a familiar face among the mounted soldiers. He starts waving enthusiastically, calling out to Mason in the departing ranks. The energy of the crowd is infectious. His father immediately grabbed the boy's arm, pulling him back. He sternly reminded Milo to maintain his composure and dignity as a noble of the Berg house. A booming voice cuts through the crowd's cheering. The head of the house is finally making his entrance, and the atmosphere shifts instantly. Soldiers stand at stiff attention, their boots clicking on the pavement as a powerful presence approaches through the gateway. Turan watches intently, his expression grave as he senses the overwhelming pressure radiating from the newcomer. A man in a dark tunic and flowing blue cape walks toward the front. His heavy steps echo with authority as the crowd goes silent. This is Battle Arabian, the current head of the house. His pale face and glowing blue eyes radiate a cold, overwhelming authority that commands the entire square. Turan leans over to Milo, nodding that Battle Arabian looks incredibly sickly. He's so pale that Turan wonders if his health is failing him completely. Milo nods, recalling old rumors about a brutal fight between the patriarch and the head of House Zahar. He wonders if it's lingering injuries from the past or just old age catching up. Despite the whispers, Battle Arabian slowly raises his gloved hand toward the sky. The air begins to hum with static as mana starts to coalesce around him. The people in the crowd look up in absolute awe, their faces lit by a flickering golden light. They wait with bated breath for a display of the legendary Arabian power. One man stares upward, his eyes wide as the clouds above begin to swirl. The sheer pressure of the magic being gathered is enough to make anyone's skin crawl. Massive, dark storm clouds suddenly blanket the sky, churning with violent energy. Lightning begins to arc through the darkness, casting long, jagged shadows over the city below. Blinding bolts of golden lightning strike down with a deafening roar. The sky literally tears open as the patriarch unleashes his elemental fury for all to see. The crowd erupts into frantic cheers, shouting for the glory of House Arabian. Some fall to their knees, praying for the Lord of Thunder to protect his descendants. Turan watches the display from the edge of the square, his eyes fixed on the man at the center of the storm. Even in a weakened state, Battle's power is enough to command the elements themselves. The lightning illuminates the entire city, turning night into day with a single pulse of mana. It's a terrifying reminder of the absolute pinnacle of magic a human can reach. Turan stares intensely, his mind racing as he processes what he just saw. He realizes the gap between them, but there's a flicker of resolve in his eyes. One day, he'll reach that level too. Later, a hand holds out a sturdy, braided bracelet featuring a glowing blue core in the center. It hums with a faint, steady magical frequency. Haram explains that just wearing the device will give his physical stamina a boost. He stands with Lady Arabian while Turan listens intently to the mechanics of the treasure. He adds a warning. If Turan injects his own mana, the effect becomes much stronger, but it drains energy fast. It's best used as a trump card rather than something to keep active constantly. Turan takes the bracelet, turning it over in his hand with a look of genuine surprise. He recognizes that this isn't just a common tool, it's an incredible treasure. Haram notes that an item this well-made wouldn't even be common among the great houses. It's a high-tier artifact that provides a massive advantage for someone on the move. Lady Arabian steps forward, her hands folded politely as she looks at Turan. She has one last thing on her mind before he departs. She asks him directly if he has any interest in formally joining House Arabian. It's a prestigious offer that most would kill for, but her tone is calm and inviting. Turan bows his head respectfully but doesn't hesitate to decline. He explains that while he's grateful, his path currently makes settling down in one place impossible. The lady sighs softly, admitting she already heard as much from Milo. She asks him to forgive an old woman's lingering attachments, acknowledging that he has his own work to do. Turan thanks her again, promising that he will never forget the hospitality he received during his stay. He assures her that the Berg family will always be his friends. He walks away down the long stone corridor, the sounds of the palace beginning to fade behind him. His mind is already focused on the road ahead. His sharp gaze narrows as he steps out into the training courtyard. There's one more person he needs to see before he leaves for good. Aziz and Milo are waiting for him in the open square. The atmosphere between the master and student is heavy with unspoken respect. Aziz doesn't say much, simply tossing a sheathed dagger toward Turan. The protagonist catches it midair, feeling the weight of the gift. The master explains it's a specialized magical device. Nothing flashy, but it's durable and the blade is incredibly sharp. It's a practical weapon for a practical man. Turan clutches the dagger to his chest and bows deeply to the man who pushed his body to its limits. He offers a sincere thank you for the training and the weapon. Aziz watches him with a stern, unreadable expression. He's a man of few words, and his silence carries the weight of a final lesson. A small, almost imperceptible smile touches the corners of the warrior's mouth. He's clearly satisfied with the student he's sending out into the world. Without another word, Aziz turns and walks back toward the training hall. His job here is done, and he doesn't believe in long-winded goodbyes. Suddenly, Milo drapes a heavy black cloak over Turan's shoulders, adjusting it with a wide grin. He's been waiting for this moment all morning. Turan looks down at the new garment, a bit confused by the sudden addition to his gear. He asks Milo what this is all about. Milo beams, explaining that these clothes are stain-resistant and will actually mend themselves if they get torn. He hands over a matching set of shirt and pants to go with the cloak. Turan looks at the boy warmly, touched by the thoughtful gift. It's clear that Milo truly values the bond they've built over the last few weeks. Milo tells him he's a good friend, and not just because he saved his life. Spending time with Turan has given him a whole new perspective on how to live. The boy asks where Turan is planning to head first now that he's free. Turan looks toward the horizon and says he's heading east. Milo winces, warning him to avoid taking a ship if he can. He mentions the waves over near Carmen are terrible, enough to make even wine glasses dance on a table. Turan gives a small smile, keeping his real destination to himself. To reach the land of Zahar and the Elril Desert, he'll have to brave far worse than a few rough waves. Milo tells him to return safely and make sure he pays him back for the expensive cloak someday. It's a playful farewell that masks his genuine concern. Turan begins his journey, walking through a field of golden, waist-high grass. He passes a few commoners on the road, blending in as just another traveler. Standing on a hill, he takes a final look around, his new backpack secured and his cloak fluttering in the breeze. He's alone again, just the way he started. He takes his first firm step onto the dirt path leading away from the city. The long journey toward the secrets of his past has truly begun. Suddenly, Turan shifted directions and picked up his pace, his feet kicking up dust as he sprinted through the sun-drenched forest. He decided to test his speed on the open road. He maintained a focused expression, his hair whipping behind him as he cut through the air, leaving the pilgrims dazed and bewildered. Something in the distance had caught his attention. He blurs past the trees, moving with a supernatural grace that far exceeds a normal traveler. The terrain shifts rapidly under his steady stride. Landscapes of rolling hills and distant villages flash by in a smear of colors. He's covering ground at an incredible rate, driven by a growing sense of unease. The bright midday sun filters through the canopy, casting long shadows across the path. The peaceful atmosphere is about to be shattered. Turan digs his heel into the dirt, coming to a sharp, sliding halt that sends a cloud of dust into the air. He stares ahead, his posture suddenly rigid. His eyes widen in disbelief at the scene unfolding before him. The air is thick with a heavy, acrid smell that makes his stomach churn. At the base of a massive, towering mountain lies the remains of a village. Smoke still curls from the charred skeletons of houses that were once full of life. Turan's nose twitches as he tries to identify the source of the stench. It's a familiar smell, one he's encountered in the darkest parts of his journey. He narrows his eyes, his mind racing through the possibilities. This wasn't a natural disaster. The destruction is too precise, too deliberate. He walks slowly into the clearing, the ground crunching under his boots. He realizes with a jolt that the smell isn't just wood smoke, it's the unmistakable scent of burning flesh. His gaze shifts to the center of the village, and he stops dead in his tracks. What he sees next confirms his worst fears about the nature of the attack. From above, the extent of the massacre is clear. The entire settlement has been razed to the ground. Debris and ash are scattered everywhere like a grisly gray shroud. A charred skull, its features melted and unrecognizable, sits amidst the ruins. The violence visited upon this place was absolute and merciless. Several bodies are lashed to thick wooden posts, their skin blackened by flame and carved with strange, jagged symbols. It's a ritualistic display of cruelty. Turan surveys the horrifying sight, his expression darkening as he realizes the implications. Dark elves have never been known to venture this far from their territories. A faint sound from nearby breaks the silence of the graveyard. Turan immediately pivots toward a partially standing stone structure. The building is a mess of broken timber and shattered stone, but it looks like the most intact part of the village. He moves toward it with cautious steps. Inside, the air is stagnant and filled with floating dust motes. The floorboards are covered in a thick layer of grime and ash from the roof's collapse. Turan spots a heavy wooden trapdoor partially hidden under a tattered rug. He kneels down, his hands reaching for the iron handles. He grips the handles firmly, his gloved fingers straining as he prepares to lift the heavy door. He senses a tiny, flickering life force coming from below. With a sharp tug, he heaves the door open, the old hinges screaming in protest. He peers down into the darkness of the cellar. His sharp eyes adjust to the dim light of the basement, searching the corners for any signs of movement. He spots a small figure huddled against the far wall. A young girl in a simple white dress is huddling in the corner, trembling violently. Her eyes are wide with a terror so deep she can't even speak. Seeing a stranger, the girl lets out a piercing scream of pure agony. She clutches her chest, her small body racking with sobs as she tries to shrink further into the shadows. Turan quickly raises his empty hands in a universal gesture of peace, keeping his voice soft and steady. He tells her to calm down, explaining that he isn't her enemy and only wants to help. The girl slowly lowers her hands, looking up at him through a veil of tears. She whispers a single, hopeful question, her voice cracking with exhaustion. Turan stands before her, his tall frame casting a long shadow as he asks her what happened to the people of her village. He needs to know what kind of threat he's dealing with. The girl's face pales even further as she recalls the horror, telling him about a mage who arrived and slaughtered everyone without mercy. Turan's mind immediately goes to the dark elf necromancer. The weight of the trauma finally becomes too much, and the girl collapses forward onto the cold stone floor. She has reached her absolute limit. Turan carefully scoops her up into his arms, checking her vitals with a practiced eye. He determines she's physically unharmed but completely drained from her ordeal. He turns back toward the stairs, carrying the small survivor toward the light. His first priority is getting her to a safe place away from the stench of death. Outside, the air suddenly hums with mana as a translucent blue arrow is notched into a bow made of solid ice. The tip glows with a dangerous, freezing energy. Turan's head snaps up as he hears a cold, authoritative voice declare that they've finally found him. He finds himself staring down the shaft of a magical weapon. A group of armed warriors has emerged from the ruins, surrounding Turan with their weapons drawn. Blonde Archer stands at their head, her ice bow aimed squarely at his chest. Blonde Archer pulls the drawstring taut, her expression full of righteous fury. She commands him to drop to his knees immediately, treating him like a common criminal. She glares at him with utter contempt, calling him a murderous bastard for what he's supposedly done to the village. Turan stands his ground, the unconscious girl still held safely in his arms. Bison and her squad surround Turan in the ruins of the village, yelling for him to stop moving. The leader, Bison Carmen, draws a crystalline ice arrow and demands he get on his knees immediately. Turan stands his ground, protectively holding the unconscious child as the group labels him a cold-blooded murderer. Bison is absolutely livid, convinced he's kidnapping the lone survivor after slaughtering the rest of the villagers. One of her men, Gil, is visibly trembling as he readies a massive fire arrow, his nerves clearly getting the best of him. Turan tries to explain that it's all a misunderstanding, but the young archer is way too jumpy to listen. Gil loses his nerve and releases the shot, sending a lethal blast of magical fire right at them. A massive explosion rocks the smoldering ruins, completely engulfing the spot where Turan was standing. Bison screams at Gil for his reckless mistake, but he can only stammer out apologies while the smoke begins to settle. Her eyes widen in total shock as she catches sight of something moving within the thick gray haze. Through the debris and smoke, a steady hand reaches out toward the stunned hunters. Turan walks out of the blast zone without a single scratch, a blue mana barrier shimmering around him and the girl. He looks down at his new bracelet, realizing he's already had to put its defensive power to the ultimate test. The hunters are completely frozen. They can't believe a human could take a magical explosion like that and just walk it off. Bison breaks out in a cold sweat, wondering if she's accidentally picked a fight with a high-tier noble wizard. Turan keeps his warning simple. He didn't do this, but if they attack again, he's going to hit back. Sensing the overwhelming gap in their strength, Bison finally lowers her bow, her suspicion turning into hesitation. In his arms, the little girl finally begins to stir, safe from the explosion thanks to his quick thinking. Turan turns to head out, seeing no point in sticking around while they're still debating whether to kill him. Bison calls out to him, identifying herself as Bison Carmen and asking for his name. He gives it to her straight, Turan. She's still skeptical, pointing out that even if he helped the kid, the evidence of him being there is hard to ignore. Turan tells her to just ask the girl when she's fully awake. She's the only one who saw the real culprit's face. Bison's expression shifts to pure shock as she realizes they have an actual witness. She urgently asks if the child really saw the monster they call the Burner. Turan stops and looks back, having never heard the name before. Bison explains that the Burner is a deranged wizard responsible for the wave of massacres in the region. For months, this rogue has been hitting remote villages, leaving nothing but ashes and charred corpses behind. Since there are never any survivors, they didn't even know if the killer was a man or a woman. All they had to go on was the name, the Burner, and the trail of devastation he left in his wake. The girl provides the first real lead. The killer was a man in a red cloak with a rough woodcutter's face. The whole group leans in, finally getting a solid description of the phantom they've been chasing for so long. Bison looks at Tiran with a mix of relief and regret, realizing her group almost killed the child's only protector. She and Gil immediately bow low, offering a sincere apology for their rude behavior and for pointing weapons at him. Tiran reflects on a memory of a man named Midden, a leader whose honesty and drive were often overshadowed by the envy of the nobility. He sighs and accepts the apology, knowing that at the very least, they were genuinely concerned for the child's safety. Bison gets straight to business, asking if he's planning to join the hunt and help them catch the rogue wizard. She explains they were so on edge that they attacked the first person they saw near the fresh fire, which led to the near disaster. She introduces a Sha, nodding that they have a natural-born pursuer on their side to lead the way. Tiran is intrigued by the term and asks if she's from the legendary House Zahar. Bison clarifies that she's Bison Carmen of House Avicha, and these men are her loyal house vassals. She explains that a Sha is actually a descendant from a branch that mixed with Zahar noble blood generations ago. While their magic is weak, they are unmatched in search magic, a lineage her house calls the primordial bloodline. Bison shifts the focus back to the mission, making a direct request to Tiran as they stand before the ruins. She asks him if he'll join her squad and help them track down the rogue wizard known as the Burner. She offers him the full bounty and her own share of mana, knowing he's trying to build a reputation in this land. Tiran inquires about the target's power, and Bison warns him that the guy is at least a noble-level wizard. She elaborates on the threat, mentioning that the Burner has already wiped out several villages, even those defended by multiple knights. Tiran takes in the grim details, his gaze fixed on the mounting evidence of the rogue's brutality. He realizes this is exactly the kind of high-stakes fight he needs to keep growing, since common monsters aren't a challenge anymore. He gives his consent, and Bison lets out a smile of pure relief, glad to have his strength on their side. Before heading out, they make a detour to a nearby village to secure a safe place for the survivor girl. Tiran hands over a heavy pouch of gold to a villager, providing more than enough to raise the child until she's an adult. He tells the man he'll be back in a few years to check on her, showing a rare moment of compassion. The villager is floored by the amount of money, staring at the bag in disbelief as the group prepares to leave. With the girl safe, the party moves out, leaving the charred remains of the village behind them. Asha, the group's scout, paused and closed her eyes, focusing her bloodline's heightened senses to find their target's trail. Her eyes snap open as she locks onto a trace of mana, her tracking ability flaring to life. As they trek through the dense forest, Bison asks for an update, and Asha notes they need to look around more. They navigate the wilderness under Asha's guidance, with the tracker pointing them toward a specific path. She spots clear footprints in the dirt, confirming that someone recently passed through this area. A broken branch catches her eye, another clue that their target is close and moving deeper into the woods. Asha pauses to sniff the air, her pursuer trait picking up the unmistakable scent of cold ash. She gets down low to examine the ground, and Bison asks what exactly she's managed to find. Asha reports finding footprints of an adult male that eventually led them right to the smell of burnt wood. She glances at Tiran, nodding that his scent would have made him an easy target if he hadn't changed his clothes. Tiran watches her work, impressed by her quiet professionalism and how efficiently she handles the hunt. Suddenly, Asha's eyes widen as she catches a fresh scent, signaling that the target is nearby. She bolts forward without warning, leaving Bison to call out for her to wait and stay with the group. They eventually reach the base of a massive, rocky cliffside deep within the mountain range. Nestled into the jagged rocks is the entrance to a dark and forbidding cave. Bison directs Tiran to stay at the front with her, while the rest of the squad follows closely behind. A small orb of blue light is conjured to cut through the oppressive darkness of the cavern. The group enters the tunnel with weapons ready, their footsteps echoing softly against the damp stone. Bison peers into the gloom, whispering a question to see if anyone is lurking further inside. Asha's eyes glow with a faint blue light as she confirms there is indeed one person waiting for them. As they round a corner, they see a lone figure standing perfectly still in the middle of a large chamber. Bison's face hardens, her eyes narrowing as she realizes they've finally cornered their prey. A torch mounted on the cave wall flickers, casting long, unsettling shadows across the rocks. They find a man in a tattered red cloak standing in the light, his back turned to the group. He turns to face them, revealing a gaunt, scarred face and a manic grin as he welcomes his guests. Turan asks if this is the man they're looking for, and Asha confirms the heavy scent of ash coming off him. Bison doesn't hesitate, drawing her ice bow and aiming right at him as she demands to know if he's the murderer. The man just smiles creepily, feigning ignorance while his eyes glint with a dangerous, unstable light. Suddenly, he thrusts his hand out, and a violent wave of fire erupts from his palm, filling the cave with heat. The rogue wizard unleashes a violent explosion of fire, the force of the blast shaking the very foundation of the cave. Members of the squad are thrown back, as the cavern is engulfed in a sea of blinding, searing heat. Turan stands his ground, his bandaged hand raised to conjure a shimmering mana barrier that deflects the flames. Behind him, Bison keeps her composure, her ice bow drawn and ready as the inferno washes over their defenses. The rogue's eyes widen in disbelief as he watches his most powerful attack be nullified by a simple shield. Bison takes advantage of the opening, letting fly a massive ice arrow that cuts through the heat like a frozen spear. The flying projectile impaled the burner's leg with sickening force, spraying blood across the cavern floor. The rogue falls to his knees, the magical ice instantly beginning to freeze his flesh and hinder his movements. He glares up with a mixture of pain and manic fury, his expression twisted by his failing attempt at murder. In a final act of desperation, he slams his palm onto the ground, channeling his remaining mana into the earth. A massive hand of solid rock erupts from the cave floor, its stone fingers reaching out to crush the intruders. Turan leaps away with clinical grace, realizing the target is proficient in both pyromancy and geomancy. The giant stone construct slams down where Turan stood, sending shards of rock flying in every direction. Mid-air, the wizard twists his body, preparing a counterattack while the terrain continues to shift violently around him. The burner looks up, his face illuminated by a sudden, intense glow of blue mana from above. Turan descends like a predator, a precise beam of energy carving a deep gash through the rogue's chest and robe. The criminal screams as he struck again, his body becoming a canvas for the relentless power of Turan's magic. Without a moment's pause, Turan gathers crackling arcs of lightning between his fingers, his gaze cold and focused. A violent bolt of electricity slams into the burner, sending his body into painful convulsions as the current takes hold. The rogue's eyes roll back as he's scorched by the discharge, his manic laughter finally silenced by the overwhelming force. The massive stone hand loses its anchor and collapses into a pile of lifeless boulders, the summoner's mana completely spent. Turan lands softly and walks toward the broken man, his silver hair settled as he assesses the outcome of the fight. Bison approaches with a shaky breath, looking at the charred and battered remains of their target in awe. Turan reaches down and retrieves a few small, dark seeds from the dirt, examining them as if they held a secret. He tells Bison he'll handle the interrogation and asks her to check on the rest of her squad for injuries. Bison agreed and wove threads of blue mana around the rogue's limbs, binding him in a magical cage to prevent any further escape. Once the man is fully restrained, Turan uses the tip of his dagger to prod him back into consciousness. The burner groans and stirs, his head lolling as he slowly opens his eyes to the reality of his capture. He looks up at Turan with a bloody, missing-toothed grin that is more disturbing than any threat. Turan presses the cold steel of his knife against the rogue's throat, warning him that any attempt to use mana will be his last. The captive scoffs, asking who they are and how they managed to find a place that he thought was untouchable. He falls silent for a second, a dark shadow passing over his face as he contemplates his failed mission. Turan doesn't tolerate the delay, sinking the blade into the man's shoulder to force a more direct response. He states coldly that mercy is a wasted concept on mass murderers, his eyes showing zero hesitation. The burner begins to ramble about a divine voice, claiming that God commanded him to burn the sinful to gain power. The villagers and Bison listen from a distance, their faces contorted with disgust at the rogue's delusional justifications. He insists that this horrific path is a secret method to gain a noble bloodline, one he believes is his destiny. He remains fixated on his goal, muttering that just a few more victims would have finalized his transformation. Bison concludes that the man is nothing more than a dangerous lunatic who has lost all touch with reality. She finds it tragic that someone would commit such atrocities for a prize that cannot be earned through blood. The wizard looks away, his thoughts turning toward the fundamental laws of growth and power in this world. A memory of the village man surfaces, reminding him that even commoners can grow strong through the standard path of hunting monsters. Another memory flashes through Turan's mind, a smiling man with a plaid headband who once spoke of witnessing the acquisition of magical power. The burner remains lost in his manic whispers, convinced that burning just a few more victims will finally grant him the high-tier bloodline he craves. Turan observes the bound prisoner with a cold intensity, recognizing that the man's twisted logic might actually be a window into a dark truth about their world. His bandaged hand tightens around the rogue's limb as he contemplates the horrific implications of what he has just discovered. Deep in the shadows of the cavern, Turan's silhouette looms as he comes to a chilling conclusion about the grim secrets that govern their reality. The execution is swift. A single, clean stroke cuts through the burner's throat, ending the criminal's reign of terror in an instant. The body collapses onto the cracked earth. Turan and Bison stand with their group, watching the life drain from the man who had caused so much suffering. One of the knights looks away, his hand covering his mouth as he struggles with the grim sight. Bison notices his discomfort and asks what's wrong. The knight mutters that killing a man who is tied up and defenseless feels more like slaughtering livestock than justice. He can't shake the hollow feeling of the execution. Bison doesn't share his sentiment. She tells him not to be foolish, reminding him that they all could have died if things had gone differently. She stares at the corpse, nodding that after all the people he murdered, death is far too light a punishment for him. Sparing him would have been an insult to his victims. Turan reaches down toward the ground where a small, weathered book lies near the body, his bandaged fingers close around the spine. He kneels down to examine the find. The book appears to be some kind of journal or ledger kept by the criminal. He opens it to find a detailed map of the region, marked with several red crosses. This provides the definitive evidence they need to confirm the man's identity as the burner. Something on the next page catches his eye. His expression shifts as he realizes the contents are far more complex than simple maps. The pages are filled with strange combination formulas that Turan has never seen before. He wonders if the voice the man claimed was God provided this forbidden knowledge. Bison calls out to him, wondering what he's found. Turan looks back at the body, his mind already moving to the next step. He decides to take what remains. Standing over the body, he prepares to use his unique ability on the fallen wizard. Threads of green mana erupt from the corpse, swirling into the air and toward Turan's hands. He absorbs the essence, adding the dead man's power to his own. In a nearby city, an official from House Carmine, Marvin Voltas, presents a box to Bison. He congratulates her on catching such a dangerous criminal, calling her a rising star. Bison accepts the praise with a polite smile, though she remains humble about the achievement. Turan stands silently behind her, observing the transaction. Marvin mentions their plans to continue traveling and hunting monsters for a while. The city is bustling around them as they finalize their business. He hands over a heavy bag of coins to Turan. Turan weighs the reward in his bandaged hand as Bison asks about his own plans. Turan states that he is heading straight for the port city of Abacha. Bison looks surprised, realizing their paths are finally diverging. She leaned in and whispered a final warning about the secrets the burner had revealed. Turan nodded seriously, promising not to breathe a word to anyone about those nonsensical words. Bison and her team wave as they part ways. Turan turns his back on the group, his focus shifting toward the long journey ahead. He waves a hand in farewell without looking back. He knows there's no need to mention the lack of proof for what they learned. It would only cause unnecessary chaos. The journey takes him through the vast, rolling dunes of the desert. The wind howls across the empty sands, kicking up dust in the heat. Turan walks alone, his backpack weighed down with supplies. He has left the mountains far behind, moving toward the humid coastal regions. He stops for a moment, noticing a change in the air. The atmosphere is becoming increasingly humid as he nears the sea. He snaps his fingers, testing the elements in this new environment. A small spark flickers at his fingertip. He finds that his fire magic is sluggish, consuming more mana for less power. It seems the heavy moisture in the air makes handling fire quite tricky. On the other hand, the water in the air responds eagerly to his call. A perfect sphere of liquid forms effortlessly above his palm. The orb grows larger, pulsing with light as he manipulates it. The high humidity makes water magic significantly easier to channel than fire. He looks toward the bright horizon, where the sun reflects off the distant ocean. This realization will change how he handles himself in the coastal cities. Turan continues his march through the sand. The glaring sun beats down on him, but he doesn't slow his pace. He finally reaches the edge of a cliff, overlooking the massive port city of Abacha. Ships dot the harbor, and the sprawling stone buildings wait below. Inside the city, the architecture is grand and imposing. People move through the stone courtyards, though the streets seem tense and watchful. In a local tavern, a man gulps down his drink in a single, desperate go. He slams the mug down, his expression grim as he speaks to his companion. The sailors complain about having to traverse the desert and face the constant threat of pirates. They mention merfolk who harpoon their ships until the hulls look like honeycombs. Their companion listens with a weary look, asking if the situation is really that bad. The tavern is filled with the low murmurs of sailors dreading their next voyage. The captain, a stocky man with a thick mustache and an eye patch, sighs as he wipes his face. He grumbles that they are desperate for a skilled knight to protect them, or they'll be paying for funerals instead of wages. Turan stands at the edge of the scene, overhearing their conversation. He watches the group from the shadows, considering his options. He approaches the table and asks if they are indeed heading toward the Emerald Desert. The captain doesn't even look up at first, clearly uninterested in another traveler. The captain tells him they're leaving tomorrow, but his ship isn't a cruise liner. He dismisses Turan, saying they don't have any room for extra cargo. He explains that taking on one person means leaving behind a barrel of booze, which goes against his principles. He values his profits over a random passenger. Turan reaches for a mug on the table, his bandaged hand moving with purpose. The captain finally looks at him with a confused expression as the young man prepares to show his value. The captain stares in disbelief, his mouth hanging open under his thick mustache. He hadn't expected the young traveler to actually possess any real power. With a mere touch of his bandaged finger, Turan has flash-frozen the liquid in the glass. It stands as a jagged, crystalline pillar of ice, steam still rising from the cold. The captain is frozen in place, eyes wide as he realizes he's in the presence of someone far beyond a commoner. Turan tells him he can speak comfortably since he's the one asking for work. The entire tavern falls silent, patrons standing up to get a better look. One man wonders aloud what such a great knight is doing in a humble place like this. The captain adjusts his tone, now much more respectful toward Sir Knight. He asks what brings someone of his status to their rough neck of the woods. Turan keeps his gaze steady, stating clearly that he wishes to board a ship heading to the Emerald Desert. He makes it clear that he's looking to be an employee, not just a passenger. He offers his services as protection, promising to help fend off any pirates or merfolk that might attack. He intends to use his combat skills as payment for the voyage. The captain sighs, admitting that his ship is very poor and the conditions are rough. He gestures to the tavern, nodding that they've already heard about the risks at sea. He admits they can't even offer a salary or a room that would be appropriate for a knight's status. They are a ragtag crew with barely enough to get by. Turan doesn't flinch, repeating that the conditions and pay don't matter to him. His only objective is to reach the Emerald Desert as soon as possible. The captain stands up with a sudden burst of energy, nearly knocking his chair over. He can't believe his luck in finding a powerful protector so easily. With a manic grin, the captain tells him it's a settled deal. He wants Turan to join them immediately before the tide turns. The sun glints off the water as the merchant ship waits at the docks. The captain bellows a welcome to his new Sir Knight as they prepare to set sail. Elsewhere, a village is engulfed in a sea of fire and smoke. The buildings are crumbling, and the sky is choked with the soot of a brutal conflict. A castle tower burns like a torch against the dark sky. Weapons are scattered among the debris, signs of a desperate defense that has long since failed. A young soldier is doubled over, gasping for breath as sweat pours down his face. He looks up with wide, terrified eyes at the horrors unfolding around him. A massive, hulking monster with glowing yellow eyes and jagged teeth let out a deafening roar. It towers over the battlefield, ready to crush anyone in its path. The beast lunges forward with incredible speed. The soldier barely manages to brace himself, the air whistling with the force of the monster's strike. A humanoid creature with long white hair and glowing eyes leaps from the shadows. It descends toward another soldier with a lethal, predatory grace. The soldier struggles to block a flurry of attacks from the pale-haired monster. Blood splatters across the ground as the battle grows increasingly desperate. Combatants are locked in a deadly dance amidst the ruins. Streaks of purple energy clash with steel as the soldiers fight to reclaim their home. A monstrous humanoid snarls, its eyes burning with a yellow light. Its face is a mask of pure rage as it prepares to tear into its next victim. The young soldier grinds his teeth, his face contorted in a mix of fear and determination. He realizes they can't hold out much longer at this rate. Dark clouds swirl overhead, suddenly illuminated by cracks of golden lightning. The air hums with a sudden, overwhelming surge of magical energy. A massive bolt of yellow lightning slams into the battlefield with a deafening boom. Monsters are incinerated instantly, their forms dissolving in the blinding light. The soldier stares up in absolute awe at the sudden salvation. He can barely believe the raw power he's just witnessed from the sky. A young woman with long, flowing black hair descends slowly from the clouds. This is Mesa Arabian, a powerful lightning mage with a stoic, detached expression. The soldier bows his head in gratitude, thanking her for the intervention. Mesa looks at him with cold, pale eyes and simply tells him to rejoin his unit. The soldier scurries away to find his comrades as Mesa stands alone among the smoking remains. She remains calm, the wind whipping through her dark hair. A man's voice calls out her name as he approaches from behind. Mesa turns her head slightly, her expression remaining unreadable. Cadram Arabian, the muscular, red-haired vice-captain of the subjugation force, steps into view. He asks if she's hurt, his eyes scanning her for any signs of damage. Mesa assures her uncle that she's fine, but he warns her not to push herself too hard. He reminds her that her life is far more precious than those of ordinary knights. Mesa dismisses his concern, stating that this level of combat is nothing to her. She shifts the topic, asking for an update on the progress of the battle. Cadram notes that the area will be reclaimed soon at this rate, though they still haven't found the enemy's tunnels. He stands with his arms crossed over his bare, muscular chest. Mesa tells him to alert her as soon as the tunnels are found, so she can deal with them herself. Her gaze is fixed on the horizon, already looking for the next threat. She takes off again, flying high into the air with a sudden burst of mana. Cadram watches her go, a small frown tugging at the corners of his mouth. Cadram clicks his tongue in annoyance, his polite facade slipping for a moment. He grumbles to himself about how insolent she has become. He thinks bitterly about how his brother raised her far too recklessly. His inner thoughts reveal a deep-seated resentment that he hides behind his military rank. He predicts a tragic end for her, thinking she'll finish just like her mother and younger brother. Meanwhile, Mesa flies over the lush green canopy of the forest below. The scene shifts back to the vast, open ocean. Waves crash against each other, white foam spray flying into the air as the current pulls at the water. The merchant ship plows through the waves, its white sails fully caught by the wind. It's a lonely vessel on a clear, bright day, moving toward its distant destination. Turan stands at the wooden railing, his long coat whipping in the sea breeze. He stares out at the endless horizon, lost in his own thoughts as the voyage begins. Turan leans against the ship's wooden railing, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He contemplates his uncertain future, wondering how he will find clues about his father once he reaches the land of Zahar. He watches the crew members go about their daily chores on the sun-drenched deck. Despite the peaceful atmosphere, Turan knows that barging into Zahar without a plan could lead to disaster. He pulls out a small, worn piece of paper from his pocket. On it is a simple portrait of his mother, her soft smile a stark contrast to the harsh world he now navigates. Staring at the sketch, Turan feels a pang of doubt. He wonders how long it will take to uncover the truth of his heritage with only a few heirlooms and this single image to guide him. A heavy, calloused hand reaches out and firmly taps Turan on the shoulder, interrupting his deep meditation. The sudden contact breaks the silence of the sea breeze. The captain stands beside him with a wide, friendly grin beneath his mustache. He jokes that if Turan keeps staring at the water with such intensity, he'll eventually burn a hole right through the seabed. Turan turns to face the captain, a subtle smile touching his lips. He explains that he was simply lost in thought, marveling at the incredible vastness of the open ocean. The captain looks out over the deck as his men work, nodding that the sheer scale of the sea can often make landfolk feel nauseous. He asks Turan if he's managing to avoid any seasickness so far. Turan keeps his balance easily against the ship's sway and assures the captain that he is feeling perfectly fine. His constitution seems well suited for the life of a traveler. The captain leans in, mentioning that he heard Turan has been spending time learning the ropes from the ship's bosun. He seems impressed by the young man's initiative to learn seafaring skills. The captain remarks on how the bosun was quite excited to have a noble Sir Knight take such a keen interest in everything from knot tying to sail management. It's rare for a guest of his status to work so hard. Turan looks back with an earnest expression, explaining that he simply thought the knowledge would be practical for his future travels. He admits that he's found the work to be far more interesting than he initially anticipated. Suddenly, a loud shout echoes across the deck, announcing that it's mealtime. The crew members immediately drop what they're doing and start heading toward the lower deck. The captain claps his hands together with a booming laugh, urging everyone to get some food in their bellies before they return to work. He leads the way, his mood as bright as the midday sun. On a simple tin plate, a modest meal of preserved fish and pickled cabbage is served. It's the standard fare for a merchant crew, meant for sustenance rather than flavor. Turan sits on a crate in the cramped dining area, eating quietly alongside the sailors. He thinks to himself that while the food can't compare to land meals, the inclusion of pickled cabbage is a welcome relief. An older, bearded bosun sitting nearby explains that the cabbage is vital for their survival at sea. He warns that without it, they would have all succumbed to gum disease a long time ago. The bosun describes the gruesome symptoms of the disease, where a sailor's gums bleed until they eventually die. He notes that the only cure is regularly eating sour foods like the cabbage on their plates. He grins, admitting that while fresh fruit would be better, it spoils much too quickly on long voyages. The pickled cabbage might taste terrible, but it keeps the crew alive and healthy. Turan pauses with his fork, finding the piece of medical lore fascinating. He asks the bosun how such a specific remedy became common knowledge among sailors. The old man shrugs, speculating that someone must have discovered the connection long ago, and the knowledge simply spread. He adds a dark joke about how sailors used to eat merfolk raw before they knew any better. Their conversation is cut short by a frantic cry from the crow's nest. A sailor points toward the horizon, shouting that a medium-sized vessel has been spotted at 2 o'clock. High above the deck, the lookout peers through a long brass spyglass, his expression tense. Below him, the crew members start to scramble, murmuring about the possibility of pirates. Through the lens of the spyglass, a single-masted ship appears, cutting swiftly through the blue water. The lookout confirms that there is no house crest or merchant flag flying from its mast. The bosun looks up at the clear sky, a grim expression crossing his weathered face. He grumbles that things were going much too smoothly for such a nice day, and states his firm belief that the approaching ship is a pirate vessel. On the deck, the crew springs into action, opening large wooden barrels filled with an assortment of weapons. Sailors grab heavy axes, curved swords, and maces, their faces hardened for the coming fight. The bosun approaches the captain, asking if they should try to outrun the other vessel. He points out that the medium-sized ship is noticeably faster than their heavy merchant craft. The captain notes that if they are chased for too long, they will eventually be caught anyway. He suggests that their best chance might be docking at a nearby island if the wind stays in their favor. The captain presses the spyglass to his eye, his brow furrowed as he assesses the distance and speed of the hostile ship. He remains silent for a long moment, calculating their odds. Lowering the glass, the captain turns his attention to Turan, who stands calmly by the railing. He asks the young man if he'll be all right in the heat of a real naval battle. Turan offers a confident smile, his silver hair catching the light. He assures the captain that as long as there are no high-ranking knights or powerful nobles on the other ship, he can handle whatever comes their way. Bolstered by Turan's confidence, the captain bellows an order to turn the ship and engage the enemy head-on. The crew erupts into cheers, raising their weapons in a defiant roar. From a high vantage point, the two ships are seen drawing closer, their hulls cutting white lines through the turquoise sea. The pirate vessel maneuvers aggressively to pull alongside the merchant ship. The pirate ship draws close enough for the shouts and taunts of the attackers to be heard clearly. A group of rough-looking men stand on the railing, laughing and demanding the merchant crew surrender their lives. Turan stands at the forefront of the crew, his expression flat and unimpressed. He asks the bosun beside him if pirates actually keep their word about sparing those who surrender. The bosun scoffs, replying that sparing usually means being thrown into the sea after having their legs cut off. Turan acknowledges this with a simple nod, his boot stepping firmly onto the deck as he prepares to move. With a sudden, explosive burst of speed, Turan leaps across the gap between the two ships. He moves like a blur, his black cloak billowing behind him as he targets the nearest cluster of pirates. Turan landed in the middle of the pirate deck with lethal precision. He kicked a pirate down in a single smooth motion, catching the attackers completely off guard as they scrambled to respond. A group of shirtless pirates, their chests scarred from many battles, stares in pure shock at the lone intruder. They grip their swords tighter, their faces contorted with confusion and sudden alarm. Below the ships, the water is churned into a frenzy of bubbles and white foam. The ocean seems to react to the sudden surge of mana as Turan begins to manifest his powers. Sharp shards of blue ice suddenly materialize in the air, swirling around Turan in a deadly vortex. A pirate leader shouts in a panic, desperately ordering his men to kill the knight before it's too late. The ice shards streak forward with the speed of arrows, piercing through the pirates with terrifying force. One man is thrown backward, blood erupting from multiple wounds as he screams in agony. Turan's voice remains steady and low as he speaks, his expression hardening as he looks upon the pirates. He decides that if they are truly the kind of men who live by such cruelty, then they deserve no mercy from him. He thrusts his bandaged hand forward, a brilliant blue mana erupting from his palm and swirling around his fingers like a frigid flame. His silver hair whips in the wind, revealing a single eye that glows with a cold, piercing light as he prepares to finish the fight. Ice shards rain down from the sky, catching the pirate boarding party completely off guard. They have no idea they've just charged into a wizard's trap. The jagged shards tear through the attackers, painting the wooden deck in sprays of red. The pirates are decimated before they can even draw their swords. Turan's lips curl into a cold smile as he watches the carnage unfold. For him, this isn't a struggle, it's just business as usual. He raises a hand, his fingers glowing with the freezing blue light of his mana. He's not done yet, and the air around him begins to crackle with frost. The deck is already a graveyard of frozen bodies, but Turan stands unmoved in the center. He watches the survivors with a detached, predatory focus. The remaining pirates try to rally, shouting for their lives as they realize the monster they've boarded. They know if they don't kill him now, none of them are making it off this ship. They surround the wizard, weapons drawn, but he just stands there, unbothered by their numbers. The sheer scale of his power makes their blades look like toys. His ice-blue eye glows with a lethal intensity. He's tracking every heartbeat on the deck, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Water surged up from beneath the sea onto the deck, knocking back anyone who dared to get too close. It was a literal wall of frost that kept them at bay. Tyran conjures a massive, jagged ice blade, ready to finish the job. The sheer weight of the weapon looks effortless in his hands. He moves with a lethal grace, carving through a pirate who was just a second away from swinging an axe. Blood spray hits the deck as the man collapses. "Don't let up," one of them screams, trying to force his terrified crewmates back into the fight. But their morale is already shattering along with their ship. Tyran meets their desperate charge with cold ice. He blocks their blades with his own conjured weapon, the metal ringing against the supernatural frost. A single wide sweep of his blade sends shards flying, cleaving through anyone in its path. He's clearing the deck in one efficient motion. With his combat skills freshly tempered by azes, Tyran impaled several pirates before they could even scream. He doesn't even break a sweat, his expression as frozen and unyielding as his magic. There's no pity in his gaze, only the calculation of a predator. He steps into a lunge, his movements a blur as he strikes down another man. The speed of his attack is impossible for an ordinary human to track. Tyran catches a spear mid-thrust, his grip firm and unshakable. He doesn't even flinch at the weapon centimeters from his face. He drives an ice shard straight into his attacker's chest, ending the fight instantly. The pirate's eyes glaze over as the cold takes hold. The wizard glances over his shoulder, his face splattered with blood but his mind focused. He's already moving on to the next threat. He leaped backward to evade a mace strike, his ice blade humming with a deadly blue light. Every swing was aimed at a vital point. His gaze is sharp, locked onto the next target with predatory focus. He isn't fighting for his life, he's executing a chore. The ice blade shimmers, its edge unnaturally sharp when needed, and liquefies into a water whip for long-range strikes. It's a miracle of magical engineering designed for one purpose: killing. He spins through the crowd, his water whip leaving a trail of blood as it sweeps across the deck. More pirates fall, their bodies pinned to the deck by the shards of his relentless magic. The floor is slick with both ice and blood. One pirate thinks he's found an opening, lunging at Tyran's back with a desperate cry. He's betting everything on this sneak attack. The man grabs Tyran from behind, holding him still for the others to move in. It's a suicidal tactic, but it's all they have left. "Now's the chance," they yell, their blades coming down on the trapped wizard. They think they finally have him pinned. The pirate's eye widens in shock as he prepares for the kill. He thinks he's the one who will finally end the shepherd's spree. He presses his dagger against Tyran's throat, certain he's finally won. He puts all his weight into the thrust. But the blade doesn't sink in. It just rests against the skin, unable to draw even a single drop of blood. The pirate stares in horror as his weapon fails against Tyran's durability. Tyran doesn't even flinch as he prepares a counterattack. Blood splashes as another ice shard hits its mark elsewhere on the deck. Blood splatters the air as his ice magic erupts once again. The pirates are being torn apart by the very ground beneath them. He spins out of the pirate's grip, his blades carving a path of destruction through the remaining crew. He's a blur of black and blue in the center of the storm. It's a total massacre. The pirates are being cut down like wheat. Tyran's efficiency is terrifyingly precise. Screams echo through the rigging as the ship becomes a floating slaughterhouse. The battle is already over, the rest is just cleanup. Tyran stands tall among the corpses, his ice blade still dripping with the remnants of his enemies. He looks completely untouched by the carnage. From above, the deck is a scene of absolute devastation. There isn't a single pirate left standing on the blood-soaked wood. Ropes are tossed over the side as the merchant ship pulls alongside the captured vessel. The survivors are ready to reclaim what's theirs. The captain steps onto the bloody deck, letting out a jovial laugh at the sight of the carnage. He walks past the fallen pirates as if he's strolling through a park. He jokes about Tyran having a side job as a cleaner, given how neatly he wiped out the enemy crew. The wizard just stands there, silent and blood-stained. His crew cheers from the other ship, celebrating the victory Tyran secured single-handedly. They chant for the knight who saved them from a watery grave. Despite the carnage, Tyran looks completely unscathed. One of the merchant crewmen, eyes wide with worry, suggests he see a physician immediately. Tyran just shakes his head, the blue mana still shimmering around his ice blade. He assures the man that none of the red on his coat is his own. It all belongs to the pirates. Later, back on the open water, the captain reveals he's finished a thorough search of the captured ship. He's practically beaming with the news of their haul. They've retreated to the captain's quarters to discuss the details. It turns out the vessel was a merchant ship that vanished from Abacha years ago, presumably taken by the very pirates they just finished off. The captain explains that the pirates tried to cover their tracks with a fresh coat of paint, a typical low-life move. He spreads a map across the table, his one good eye focused on their current position. Since Turan handled the entire boarding party alone, the captain makes it clear that the ownership of the ship belongs entirely to him. He leans back, waiting to see what the wizard plans to do with his new prize. Turan takes the news with his usual stoicism, simply blinking at the sudden acquisition of a massive merchant vessel. He asks what's typically done in a situation like this. The captain explains there are a few options on the table. They've both settled in for a long discussion, the cabin lit by a warm, golden glow as they talk business. One option is returning it to the original owners in Abacha and hoping for a reward. The captain speaks from experience, his mustache twitching as he describes the humble act of asking for a payout. However, that path involves mountains of paperwork and catering to bureaucrats. It could take months just to see a single copper coin from the legal owners. The captain points to another spot on the map, suggesting the Northern Sea Islands. He thinks it's better to just sell the ship there since they're already heading in that direction. His finger lands on a specific island as he explains that the locals are always desperate for ships. Selling to those in need is the quickest way to get the highest price possible. But moving a vessel that size requires a crew, and Turan is just one man. The captain notes that he'll have to mobilize several of his own boys to get the ship to port. Turan, ever the pragmatist, agrees that he can't sail it alone and should pay for the help. The captain laughs, appreciating a man who understands how the world works, and suggests a 10% service fee. Turan counters with 20% if the captain handles every aspect of the sale. He holds up two fingers to emphasize the point, his expression calm and focused on the deal. The captain practically explodes with laughter, clutching his chest at the generous offer. He knows plenty of people in the islands and promises to get them an incredible price. Their business meeting is abruptly cut short when a crewman bursts through the door. He's panicked and shouting something about finding a mermaid on the pirate ship. The captain slams his hands on the desk, his shock evident as he wonders if they're being attacked by mermaids now. Turan just looks on, his gaze sharp as he takes in the new information. The crewman clarifies that it's not an attack. They found a captive mermaid hidden below deck. The captain's shock turns into a different kind of intensity as he hears the news. Turan and the captain immediately head out to investigate the find. They descend into the hold of the pirate vessel, the air thick with the smell of damp wood and salt. As they walk, the captain's crew is busy cleaning the blood-stained deck. They're scrubbing away the remnants of the battle, making the ship look like a merchant vessel once again. The captain and Turan walk through the corridors with the crewman who reported the find. The mood has shifted from business negotiation to curiosity about this important guest. The captain asks if Turan wants to see the mermaid for himself. Turan agrees, but his first thought is practical. He asks if mermaids actually sell for a high price. They descend the stairs into the dark, lower hold of the ship. The captain explains that a pretty female mermaid would be worth a fortune on the mainland market. He describes how the rich lords who have nothing but money and aging bodies are obsessed with anything mysterious or exotic. A mermaid is the ultimate prize for their collections. They reach a heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. The captain gestures forward, his tone hushed as they prepare to see what the pirates were hiding. Turan steps into the room and stops, his ice-blue eyes landing on the captive. He takes in the small figure huddled in the corner without saying a word. The captive is a young mermaid with blue-tinged skin and jet-black hair, bound tightly with thick ropes. He looks up at the intruders with a mix of fear and defiance. The captain's face falls as soon as he gets a good look at the captive. He sighs, nodding that it's a shame, but the mermaid is clearly a male. He clicks his tongue in disappointment, explaining that this one will go for a pittance since the rich lords have no interest in male mermaids. Turan stands silently, observing the worthless captive. The captain notes the only exception would be a legendary royal who can transform into a fish, but those are practically myths. The boy's eyes flash with anger as he listens to them talk about his value. Armani shouts back at them, calling them insolent and demanding to know how they can speak of him like that. His voice is high and desperate as he struggles against his bonds. He identifies himself as Armani, the 47th Prince of North Estadale. He demands respect from what he calls lowly humans of the land, his blue eyes bright with turquoise light. Turan and the captain share a skeptical look. The captain wonders aloud if the boy is actually saying he's royalty or just desperate to stay alive. The captain suggests it might be a bluff, a last-ditch effort to keep himself from being killed or sold as a common slave. Turan remains silent, his expression unreadable as he studies the prince. The captain asks if Armani can actually transform into a fish, as the legends say. Armani admits he cannot, which only seems to prove the captain's point about his lack of value. Armani desperately explains that he can only transform when he's in the sea and in a perfect state. Being tied up and kept out of the water makes it impossible for his magic to work. Turan and the captain don't look convinced. The captain thinks the boy is just playing tricks to find a way to escape back into the ocean. The captain asks Turan what he wants to do with the captive. He mentions having heard that mermaids have a habit of eating humans, adding another reason to be wary. Turan looks down at Armani with a terrifyingly cold expression. Since the boy isn't worth any money and is just another mouth to feed, he simply says they should kill him. The captain considers the idea, nodding it would be a jackpot if the boy were telling the truth, but the risk of being made fools of is too high. Armani's eyes widen as he realizes the wizard isn't joking. The boy trembles as they discuss releasing him, just to watch him swim away. He knows he has to offer them something more if he wants to survive this encounter. Turan towers over the captive boy, blue mana gathering in a shimmering ball within his palm. Bound in thick ropes, Armani cringes back against the wooden floor, his expression filled with dread. "Estop, how dare you?" Armani screams, his voice cracking as he looks up at the looming shadow of the wizard. Sweat beads on his forehead, his turquoise eyes wide with terror at the display of power. The blue light pulses with a sharp, crackling sound from Turan's bandaged hand as the spell intensifies. The raw energy swirls around his fingers, ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. Armani frantically pleads for his life, swearing that he has never once eaten a human being. He looks absolutely desperate, insisting that such a thought never even crossed his mind. Turan's gaze remains ice-cold and unmoving, his single visible eye fixed on the mermaid with a murderous focus. There is no hint of mercy in his expression as he prepares to strike. Armani's jaw tightens and he grits his teeth, trying to find any leverage to save himself. He knows he has only seconds left to convince the wizard to stay his hand. "If you spare me, I'll give you treasure, treasure," he bellows, his voice echoing through the damp hold. Turan and the captain stand in the background, their silhouettes dark against the dim light. The captain's interest is immediately piqued by the mention of riches, echoing the word with a curious tone. Armani continues to shout desperately, his face contorted with the effort of his plea. He speaks of the legendary relics left behind by the Freyan gods, conjuring a mental image of a golden-haired goddess surrounded by divine weapons. The vision of the Freyan goddess and her treasures hangs in the air between them. Outside, the sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow across the rolling waves of the open sea. A small, rocky outcropping sits lonely in the distance under the fading light. The ship eventually pulls into a bustling port city, the last rays of the sun bathing the stone buildings and tall masts in a deep orange light. The entire harbor seems to glow in the peaceful twilight. A collective cheer of "land" erupts from the crew as they prepare to head ashore for a night of hard drinking. They're eager to leave the ship behind for a few hours of relaxation in the city. As the evening settles in, Turan walks along the balcony of the port's overlook, his coat fluttering slightly. A man follows close behind, asking if he's finally reached a conclusion about the boy. Turan reveals that the location Armani mentioned isn't far, and he plans to investigate it and return before the night is through. He looks determined to see if the mermaid's claims hold any truth. The heavy, metallic sound of chains clanking fills the quiet evening air as they prepare to secure their guide. The iron links are cold and unforgiving in the dim light. A small rowboat departs from the stone docks, cutting through the calm water as twilight deepens into night. The silhouette of the city begins to fade into the darkness behind them. Armani sits in the boat, his wrists bound by the heavy chains, and complains loudly about the lack of trust. He insists that as a prince, his promise is ironclad and he wouldn't dream of running. "You'll really let me go if the treasure is actually there, right?" Armani asks, his voice smaller now as he seeks one last confirmation of their deal. He looks up at Turan, hoping for a sign of sincerity. Turan stands at the stern, his glowing hand resting near the hilt of his ice blade as he gives a simple, chilling, "Yes." His silver hair catches the faint light as he stares out across the dark water. From high above, the small boat appears like a tiny speck on the vast blue ocean, moving further away from the safety of the port. Armani warns Turan not to be disappointed by the treasure's nature, as it is sacred to his people. The full moon hangs high in the clear night sky, its pale light cutting through the scattered clouds. Turan simply tells the boy to stop talking and lead the way. The boat glides through the dark water under the watchful eye of the moon. Both Turan and Armani fall into a tense silence as they reach their destination. Leaving the boat behind, Turan dives deep into the ocean, swimming down toward the darkened structures on the seafloor. He moves through the water with surprising grace, heading for the shadows below. Beneath the surface, Turan navigates the silent, blue world, his silver hair flowing as he looks around. He's stripped off his heavy coat, moving more freely as he searches for the promised relics. He holds his breath, his eyes scanning the depths for anything out of the ordinary as small bubbles escape his lips. The pressure of the deep sea doesn't seem to slow him down. Suddenly, the silhouette of a colossal creature emerges from the darkness, its serpentine body coiled around glowing white rocks. The massive beast looms over Turan, its presence filling the deep underwater canyon. Turan swims closer to the massive beast, its scales shimmering with a cold, blue light that matches the depths of the ocean. He appears tiny compared to the sheer size of the creature's crystalline body. He reaches out toward the massive crystalline plates, the light from the creature illuminating the jagged rocks of the underwater trench. The treasure Armani promised is protected by this ancient, slumbering guardian. Under the pale glow of a full moon, Turan uses his magic to propel their small boat across the dark waters of the Freyan Sea. Armani grumbles, warning Turan that the treasure might be underwhelming by human standards. High above, the moon sits cold and indifferent in the cloudy night sky. Turan doesn't seem to care about the quality of the loot, he just wants the guide to keep moving. The boat cuts through the waves, leaving a trail of white foam in its wake. Armani keeps rowing, his expression a mix of nervousness and lingering defiance. Turan remains silent, his sharp gaze fixed on the horizon as he waits for their destination to appear. A rugged island looms out of the darkness, its rocky cliffs silhouetted against the bright moon. Armani confirms they've arrived at the spot. Turan reaches down, his fingers skimming the surface of the water as he prepares to use his magic. He closes his eyes and activates his search magic, a soft blue light pooling in his palms and reflecting off his face. The magical pulse ripples through the ocean, illuminating the depths and revealing the marine life drifting through the currents. Sharks and strange deep-sea creatures glide through the dark, unaware of the wizard's prying eyes scanning their territory. Turan notes with a hint of satisfaction that Armani hasn't led him into a merfolk ambush, at least not yet. The boat approaches a jagged rock face, where the tide crashes violently against the stone. They find a calmer stretch of beach and pull the boat ashore, the dark forest of the island waiting for them. Leading Armani by a heavy chain, Turan walks through the dense woods, the boy stumbling slightly as he searches for a landmark. Armani suddenly stops, peering through the trees as he spots the clearing he remembers. Turan steps forward to see what has caught the boy's attention. In the center of the forest lies a glowing inland pool, the abyssal spring, its waters shimmering with an eerie light. Turan looks down into the depths, questioning if it's as shallow as it looks. Armani admits it's actually about 300 meters deep. The wizard stares at the boy, who shrinks back under the silent, intense scrutiny. Armani lets out a cry as Tyran begins wrapping thick ropes around a nearby tree trunk. Tyran ties the boy securely to the tree, ignoring his frantic questions about whether this is just more imprisonment. Armani shouts in a panic, realizing that if Tyran dies down there, he'll be left here to starve to death. Tyran sheds his coat and tells the boy he'd better hope for both their sakes that he makes it back. Standing at the edge of the pool, Tyran's reflection ripples in the water as fish swim peacefully below. He takes a final, deep breath, his lungs filling with air before the long descent. A massive splash echoes through the quiet clearing as Tyran dives headfirst into the glowing spring. He plunges into the dark blue void, leaving a trail of bubbles as he swims toward the bottom. Tyran keeps his eyes open, scanning the surrounding darkness for any signs of movement or treasure. The pressure builds as he descends further, his body cutting through the water with focused determination. He reaches a cavern floor covered in glowing aquatic plants that provide enough light to see his surroundings. Tyran swims through the strange underwater forest, his eyes darting around as he searches for the specific location Armani mentioned. Suddenly, he freezes mid-stroke as a gargantuan shape emerges from the shadows. A giant underwater serpent is coiled around the massive underwater rocks, its scales shimmering like dark metal. Tyran approaches the beast, looking small and fragile against the creature's immense size. He looks up to the top of the serpent's head and sees exactly what he was looking for, a figure sitting cross-legged. A small burst of air escapes his mouth as he takes in the incredible sight. He quickly clamps his hand over his mouth, struggling to hold the remaining air in his lungs against the crushing depth. Pushing off from the rocks, Tyran swims up toward the serpent's head. He stands on the creature's back, coming face to face with the mysterious armored figure. Tyran narrows his eyes, examining the motionless knight for any signs of life. The Freyan knight is clad in ornate dark armor, sitting as if in meditation even in death. Tyran marvels at how the body has remained perfectly intact at this depth, without turning into a wraith. He spots a golden, compass-like artifact hanging from the knight's belt and reaches out to claim it. The golden compass glows softly, its intricate needles and markings promising to reveal more than just direction. It's an ancient artifact with power that Tyran is only beginning to understand. Back on the surface, Armani remains bound to the tree, staring anxiously at the dark, still waters of the spring. The silence of the forest only adds to his growing dread. Suddenly, the surface erupts. Tyran bursts through the water, gasping for air as he hauls his way back toward the grassy shore. Armani's eyes go wide with relief. He frantically asks if Tyran actually found what he was looking for down in that abyss. Tyran pulls himself onto the bank, his shirtless torso glistening with water as he catches his breath. He looks exhausted but successful. He doesn't answer immediately, his expression unreadable as water drips from his silver hair onto the forest floor. Through the lens of his new artifact, Tyran sees a flickering blue flame ignited deep within the boy's chest. The energy doesn't stop there. It pulses through Armani's entire body, making his pointed ears and scaled skin glow with a vibrant, ethereal light. Tyran holds the compass up, confirming his theory. The artifact allows him to perceive the hidden life force and internal energy of any living being. Without a word, he extends a hand and unleashes a precise burst of magic that shatters the heavy iron chains binding the boy to the tree. Armani stares at his freed hands in disbelief, the broken shackles falling into the dirt at his feet with a heavy thud. As Tyran pulls his coat back on, the boy admits he never expected to be let go so easily, assuming he'd just be sold back into slavery. Tyran simply replies that he's a man of his word. Since the boy didn't lead him into a trap, his debt is paid and he's free. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Armani calls him a kind demon and promises to spare Tyran's life if their races ever go to war in the future. Tyran brushes off the promise as sentimental nonsense, already focused on his next move as he turns away. With a final look back, Armani dives into the spring and disappears beneath the surface with a powerful splash. The boy's true form is revealed underwater, a graceful silhouette swimming back to the depths where he belongs. Turan watches the ripples fade, acknowledging to himself that the kid probably wasn't lying about his royal bloodline after all. Later, at a bustling harbor, a massive wooden ship sits docked against the stone pier under a clear blue sky. The sound of a heavy whip cracking echoes across the deck, followed by a pained groan from one of the crew members. A group of sailors huddles together on the deck, their backs raw and bleeding from a public lashing as their crewmates look on. The chief mate, a rugged man with a thick mustache and an eye patch, commanded everyone to repeat his warning. They would not be allowed to be late again. Turan steps onto the deck and asks what the commotion is about. Captain Samuel greets him, noticing he's finally awake. The whipping continues without pause, the chief mate making it clear that insubordination is a death sentence on his ship. The chief mate explains that these men weren't just late. They caused a massive brawl at a tavern, and this is the price for ignoring his orders. Turan watches the punishment with a detached expression, his mind focused on something other than the sailors' immediate pain. He looks through the compass again, and the sight is different this time. With every strike, he can see the sailors' vibrant life force leaking out. The blue and orange flames of their internal energy flicker and fade with each wound, visually representing the physical toll of the violence. Leaving the deck, the scene shifts to the warm, amber glow of a tavern where the real business is about to go down. Turan sits at a heavy wooden table across from Captain Samuel and his associate, the atmosphere thick with the smell of old wood. Samuel's one good eye narrows as he looks at the wizard, his face a map of scars and hard-earned maritime experience. He gets straight to the point, acknowledging Turan's presence and asking if they can finally settle the deal for the ship. The captain introduces himself and his one-handed associate, joking that between the two of them, they've got just enough parts to make a whole man. He offers a lump sum of 1,000 Zahar gold coins, a fortune, expecting a quick handshake to finalize the sale. Turan leans back, admitting the price is fair, but states that there is one significant problem with the arrangement. He explains that carrying around sacks of gold coins is inconvenient and asks for payment in magic tools or holy relics instead. Their associate let out a dry laugh, telling him that such rare items couldn't be found in a place like this. He would need to go to Kamed for that. He describes Kamed as a city ruled by the House Dermin, a powerful tamer bloodline that controls beasts of all kinds. Turan considers this, thinking that a beast capable of understanding human speech would be a massive asset on his long journey. Soon after, the anchor is raised, and the great ship sets sail, its white canvas catching the wind as it heads for the open sea. On deck, the sailors are in high spirits, considering the voyage a lucky break after their previous run-in with pirates. The mood shifts instantly when the lookout in the crow's nest shouts a frantic warning. Dark, ominous clouds are rolling in ahead. The storm strikes with sudden, violent intensity, swallowing the ship in a vast expanse of dark, churning water. The ocean has turned into a wall of shadow and spray. Massive waves crash against the hull, and torrential rain blurs the line between the sea and the sky in a chaotic dance of nature's fury. On deck, the chief mate screams over the howling wind, ordering the crew to furl the sails and secure the cargo before everything is lost to the deep. The sailors scramble to move heavy crates, their faces taut with fear as a giant wall of water looms over the railing, threatening to sweep them away. The vessel is tossed like a toy, tilting precariously as it's caught in the center of a massive, swirling vortex of ocean and rain. Desperate cries fill the air. Men lose their footing on the slick wood, sliding toward the edge as the ship lurches violently to the side. One sailor is thrown into the air, his scream cut short as he is swept toward the raging, white-capped ocean. Suddenly, the sailor's eyes widen in utter confusion, as his body inexplicably hovers right above the cold, dark water. It turns out Turan was the one who acted. He stands firmly on the deck, his hand raised as he weaves a complex spell that lifts the falling men and heavy cargo into the air. With a sharp gesture, he directs the levitating sailors back toward the safety of the ship's center, far from the churning edge. He commands a startled crew member to get down, his voice cutting through the roar of the tempest with unnatural clarity and authority. Turan's hands glow with a brilliant blue light, the threads of his mana weaving into physical form to take control of the maritime chaos. Ethereal blue ropes of energy lash out, binding the loose cargo and securing the ship's structures against the battering wind. Barrels and crates that were once sliding toward the sea are now held firmly in place by Turan's magical, glowing grip. Lightning fractures the sky as the ship survives the first wave of the assault, the hull groaning under the immense pressure of the storm. Deep inside the hull, the passengers and crew huddle together in the dim light, shivering from the cold and the sheer terror of the ocean's wrath. Turan enters the crowded hold, his presence immediately drawing the eyes of every frightened person in the room. Relieved whispers of gratitude break the silence as Turan checks on them, his calm expression a stark contrast to the violence outside. The captain, drenched and exhausted, thanks Turan, admitting that they surely would have sunk if he hadn't furled the sails in time. He looks around at the shivering group, wondering aloud if they can really withstand the rest of this brutal storm. The people pull their blankets tighter, their teeth chattering as the damp, biting cold of the sea seeps into their bones. Turan remains silent for a moment, his serious gaze fixed on the shivering survivors huddled on the floor. He suddenly commands everyone to gather in a tight circle around him, his voice leaving no room for argument or hesitation. The captain's eyes widen in alarm as he asks if Turan intends to start a fire in the middle of a narrow wooden boat, a dangerous gamble. Ignoring the protest, Turan snaps his fingers with a sharp clack, a small spark of orange light appearing at his fingertip. A massive spiral of fire magic erupts from Turan, swirling upward and illuminating the entire hold with a fierce, golden radiance. The flames dance harmlessly through the air, carefully controlled so they radiate warmth without scorching the wooden planks of the hull. The people breathe heavy sighs of relief as the biting cold is pushed back, replaced by a deep, comforting heat. The captain watches in awe, finally understanding the true depth and sophistication of the magic Turan wields. Under the protective glow of the wizard's fire, the crew finds the strength to endure, a living testament to the ancient rule that wizards must both reign over and care for humanity.
Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.